But there is more to the Ffestiniog than ferrying tourists. It has long been established as a 7-days-a-week railway, running scheduled services for the public, a real working railway in addition to its preserved status.
I started volunteering here when I was at university studying engineering. I've always been interested in railways, but I came here in my engineering vacations because this is a good place to learn practical engineering, because we do all types of engineering work here.
Is the only one that sticks out that much?
No, that'll be all right. I mean, it's definitely not, the threads are definitely engaged. I'm one of the few paid staff here on the Ffestiniog Railway. And my job is engineer. All right then, Joe. We use a 2-foot gauge here. That means basically there's 2 feet between the rails. Now, the Ffestiniog Railway was a very early pioneer of using a narrow gauge. And what it meant really is you could build a railway much more cheaply than a normal standard gauge railway. And this idea of building a lower cost railway spread all around the world. A lot of it inspired by the Ffestiniog Railway.
The railway's home base is Porthmadog on the North Wales coast. It was to here in the old days that the slate was brought for shipping on. It's a sleepy enough place nowadays, but it can still manage one big surprise. For the Ffestiniog is not the only preserved railway based in this little tourist town. Just half a mile away, there exists a competitor, the Welsh Highland 1964 Railway Company Limited, and its main aim in life is plainly stated in its name. For over 30 years, the hope here has been to recreate the old Welsh Highland Railway that once ran the 25 miles to Carnarvon. Everything about this railway, in tone and style and ambition, seems diametrically opposed to the dreams and drives of the Ffestiniog.
This locomotive we call Gellet. It was actually obtained from South Africa when we were visiting Johannesburg back in 1979. We discovered it at the Rustenburg Platinum Mines, and it's now been restored to full working order. This locomotive is from German Southwest Africa and is, in fact, the biggest narrow-gauge steam locomotive in the country, we believe. And there's a major restoration job on here to get this working.
Well, this has taken 4 years to restore. It's reputed at Gladstone Road in this coach. This is how it's finished its life as a summer house in a garden. It's still got its original fittings, like door handles, and a lot of it was used for patterns.
This is the sole surviving locomotive from the original Welsh Highland Railway, built in 1906, and this is the flagship of the fleet.
Sir Russell was lying at Dinas when the railway closed, and the Minister of Supply took her over, and she went working in an iron ore quarry. That's how she survived. She's 90-year-old this year, and my ambition is to see it pounding up through the Aberglaslyn Pass with this behind it.
This is the Aberglaslyn Pass, but pursuing the dream of Russell's steaming up here has caused a storm, for there is a David and Goliath situation brewing in this corner of Welsh Wales.
Beside me is the trackbed of the old Welsh Highland Railway, where a train last ran 60 years ago. And for the last 5 years, we've had 2 different railway companies fighting it out expensively in the courts for the right to reopen and operate this railway that went bankrupt 4 times in the first half of this century.
David is the Welsh Highland 1964 company, Goliath the Ffestiniog. And for a time, David appeared to be winning. First a High Court test case, next a public inquiry. Then, on his last day in office, the Transport Minister reversed the situation and gave the new Welsh Highland to the Ffestiniog, and all hell broke loose.
It has got very bitter. There have been voiced threats. It's not surprising. Some of the Welsh Highland people going round in T-shirts at meetings with "Death to the Ffestiniog scum" written on them.
All we've had so far from the side of town is threats and aggression. They keep expecting us to sort of hand over everything effectively. They expect us to give all the time, where they keep forgetting that they're actually aggressors. So people, yeah, do get upset. Certainly there was a campaign of T-shirts at an EGM 18 months ago, where about 15 members who were fairly upset, printed some T-shirts up and gave the FR chairman a bit of a hard time.
The Ffestiniog chairman checks progress on the restoration of a big loco that figures prominently in his plans for the new Welsh Highland. He doesn't buy the proprietorial stance his near neighbours take to this line.
Many people have looked at preserving the Welsh Highland Railway. We, in fact, looked at it in the early 1950s. Since then, many groups have looked at rebuilding the line, and one of those has been the Welsh Highland 1964 Company.
In 1994, the result of the public inquiry came out. The inspector said the 1964 Company, in conjunction with the Gwynedd County Council, should have the track bed.
The trouble is you end up with a difference between a big business-orientated railway, which has said itself it is commercial, not a preserved railway. And you've got our own organisation where you've got the individuals who've been working here, some people have been here 25, 30 years, focused on this railway, and you get opposition coming in telling us that our railway's no good for a start, we couldn't run in a brewery.
Ffestiniog, we believe, is a very commercial organisation, but at the same time it provides satisfaction to many, many thousands of volunteer supporters. Perhaps our friend at the 64 Company would have preferred a different route with a slower railway with less pressures.
My preference is the Welsh Highland. It's very much more small family sort of railway. People who come and work here are all sort of very good friends. It's very much more of a social element rather than run as a business.
We are often known as the train baths, the small train. The locals look at us as a community-based railway. People like me live in this area. Quite a few of our directors live in this area. I don't know what the other side are like.
The other side are the one and only winners in the biggest game in town. Almost £6 million of Millennium funding has been granted for them to pursue their plans for the new Welsh Highland. In the process, the Ffestiniog have gazumped the best hopes of their near neighbours.
It's very unfortunate, it's very annoying. A lot of people have worked very hard here over the years to actually build up what we've got here. It's just unfortunate that sort of politicians have got involved in what is essentially, for most people, a hobby.
The first part of our project is costing just under £10 million. That's to rebuild the railway from Carnarvon to the foot of Snowdon for the year 2000.
I think there is a fundamental difference between the ideal of the 1964 Company and the ideal of the Ffestiniog. The 1964 Company, if you like, their aim has been to recreate a fairly cute railway, whereas the Ffestiniog thought big, they thought grand, they thought expansionist, they thought 25 miles. And I think it is this, if you like, this culture clash which is behind a lot of the problems. I also think it is that difference, which is why the Ffestiniog, though they lost the battles, at the end they won the war.
Well, here we've got one of the monuments to the tragedy of the Welsh Highlands history, if you like. The first scheme to build the railway through, this is one of their remains. They built the bridge, they built the embankment leading up to it, and when they got this far, this is where the money ran out. And they stopped, and it was left. And this bridge is a bridge that never actually carried a train.
The Welsh Highland Railway closed back in the 1930s. We have set out to rebuild the railway 25 miles long and complete that within the next 10 years. That is a task that nobody else has ever contemplated in this country before. Carnarvon hasn't had a railway for 30 years, and its tourist market has tended to decline. The town are keen to see the railway arrive as soon as possible.
I don't blame the volunteers at the FR, or even the paid staff. I know many of them are just fed up about the situation as we are. But unfortunately, it would appear that some people on the side of town have got big ideas, and unfortunately it means crushing any opposition who get in the way.
We all work for nothing. I'm a volunteer. There are many thousands of other supporters who are volunteers on Ffestiniog and Welsh Highland, and of course the other railways in the country. We are so emotionally involved, we sometimes have disagreements.
There's been a lot of talk about us buying a mile of track and it's a spoiling action. Well, that's not the case at all. We've said that we would build this railway and 2 miles of track from here and hand it over to the Festiniog Railway, lock, stock and barrel, when they effect a physical connection from the main line. So this is a very constructive position to take and leave us in more resources into the overall Welsh Highlands scheme.
I sometimes feel that if all the energy that had gone into our slanging had been put into building a railway, perhaps we would be talking at Cardiff now rather than Carnarvon.
Every few weeks, both sides announce a new peace initiative. But only time will tell if they can manage to keep it on the rails.
The steam locomotive is the attraction that will encourage tourists out of their cars onto the trains.
The steam locomotive, that should have died with Dr. Beeching, is alive and well the length and breadth of the country. At any given time, more than 100 locomotives are being restored and prepared for a new working life on the old steam lines. And every last one of them will soon be all steamed up and ready to roll.
I think the interesting thing is that playing at trains question has been put at our door a few times now. I think no longer that statement frightens. We're quite happy to be accused of playing trains because that's been a success and we can prove it.
Tomorrow afternoon, the late Willie Rushton looks at steam trains in the West Country in Great Little Trains tomorrow at 12:50.